Hello guys, and welcome to a new video. And before we get started, wow, just looking at how my last video did, and I know I say this at the beginning of every video, but guys, just thank you so much. Just everything you all are doing. Big thank you to all my new subscribers and everybody who's watching my videos. It means a lot that you all love history and are enjoying my content and everything. So again, thank you. And as always, please hit that subscribe button and give my video a like. All right, guys, let's get into the topic of this video. For today's video, we're going to be talking about another big part of the Titanic story that a lot of people do not know about. There is this common myth that the Titanic was just all alone in this big, vast, empty ocean when it was sitting on its distress call and it was sinking. However, that was not the case. This is the story of a ship that just happened to be close by, but due to a bunch of unfortunate circumstances, was not able to come to the Titanic's aid.
The ship we are talking about today is this ship, the SS Californian. This ship was very close to where the Titanic was sinking, but due to some unfortunate circumstances, it did not come to the Titanic's aid.
Now, before we keep talking about the Californian, we need to discuss a weird weather phenomenon that was going on in the area of the Titanic and where it was sinking. You see, the Titanic had just sailed from warmer water into a region of much colder water that was pulled from the north down to where the Titanic was, called the Labrador Current. And this current brings icebergs and stuff from the north all the way down to the south where the Titanic was steaming.
This map is a great example of how the Labrador Current works. The blue line is the cold water of the north, and that current brings the cold water of the north down to the Gulf Stream and the warmer waters of the south. And the modern steamships of the time of Titanic sailed along the Gulf Stream and the warmer waters.
Now, as the Titanic entered this region of much colder water, the passengers and everyone on board noticed not directly how much colder the water was, just that the weather seemed to change. On the Titanic, the passengers who were in, lighter clothing all of a sudden felt the need to bundle up and wear warmer clothes. There was a huge temperature change from that morning to the evening when the Titanic entered this region of much colder water. So, as the Titanic entered this much colder region, she ended up striking the iceberg not far from where this cold water and this warm water actually met. And this also affected the air above the water as well. So you have all of these weird temperature clashes. You've got warm air, warmer water, colder water. And this can create a mirage effect, similar to a mirage in a desert. This can actually create something that is called a cold water mirage, which can also generate what's known as a false horizon when at sea. And it can distort your view. So when you're looking at the front of a ship and you're looking out towards the horizon, you think you can see the horizon, but it's actually a false horizon. So the horizon you are seeing is above where the actual horizon is.
This chart is a great example of how all the different temperature things were affecting the Titanic that night. You can see the warm air that the Titanic was leaving and the cold air that it was going into. It was sailing into the cold Labrador Current water, leaving the Gulf Stream behind it. And all of these weird temperature variations created a perfect condition for a cold water mirage. This picture shows the false horizon. The false horizon is what the lookouts would have seen, and the actual horizon is below that. And you can see the iceberg is right in the middle. So anything in between the false horizon and the actual horizon would be invisible until you were right up on it.
You see, because the crew were looking at this false horizon, the iceberg was completely hidden from view until they were almost right up on it. And to make matters worse, there was no moon that night. So they couldn't see the water breaking at the base of the berg either. And the ocean was absolutely flat. It wasn't doing anything. So it was all of these unfortunate circumstances that all lined up for the perfect disaster, which caused Titanic to hit the iceberg. On the Californian, the captain of the Californian was this man.
The captain of the Californian was this man, Stanley Lord.
Yes, the captain of the Californian's name was Stanley Lord. And he actually noticed field ice and all this other stuff coming up on them. So he actually made the call to stop his ship and have it wait for the night. And their wireless guy, the guy who was using the Morse code machine that the ships at the time used, tried to contact the Titanic.
This picture was taken from the James Cameron feature film deleted scene on the Californian, and this is a good example of what field ice is that they would have likely seen that night on the deck of the Californian.
Now, the Titanic had two wireless operators. Their names were Jack Phillips and Harold Bride. And they were really busy at that time trying to send passenger messages. And they were talking to a place called Cape Race. Now, the way wireless technology worked at that time it was just Morse code, dots and dashes.
This clip from the Titanic film A Night to Remember shows exactly how the Morse code machine worked. It was just a machine that they pushed down on, and it generated dot and dash signals that other ships could pick up. So if you were another ship listening for Titanic's distress signal, it would sound like this.
And the further away a location was that you were talking to, you had to turn your radio up in order to hear the faint dots and dashes of that area. But there was no different radio frequencies or anything like that. So any ship or anyone who was listening could hear what you were saying. So Jack Phillips, specifically, Harold Bride was there but not on the radio, he was listening for the very, very faint beeps of Cape Race. And because he had his radio turned up so much, so he could very faintly hear those dots and dashes, when the Californian radioed in, the Californian being 10 miles away, it came through as a really, really loud ring, which caused Jack Phillips to rip his headphones off, and he was already angry and frustrated due to how much work he had to do. So he ended up sending a very, very rude reply to the Californian's wireless operator. The Californian's operator only wanted to say, hey, we're stopped in field ice and we're surrounded by icebergs. But because Jack Phillips was annoyed, overworked, and he just got a very, very loud ring in his ears, he basically told the Californian to shut up. He's trying to talk to Cape Race. There is a deleted scene from the James Cameron movie that actually showcases this.
Bloody hell. Christ. It's that idiot on the Californian. Tell him to sod off. I'll do more than that. Keep out. Shut up. I'm working. Cape Race.
So right after that happened, the Californian's radio operator, who had just got done working a huge shift, powered down the radio and went to bed for the night. Now the Californian only had one radio operator. So when he powered down, the Californian couldn't hear any messages from any other ships in the area. And 10 to 20 minutes later, after the Californian had powered down its radio and all that, that is when Titanic struck the iceberg. In the minutes leading up to the Titanic hitting the iceberg, crew members on the Californian who were on the bridge and looking around on deck noticed a ship coming up on the horizon. Now, when I say coming up, I mean pretty far away, 10 miles or so, but they could see the faint light of a ship. And at sea, at night, you can see the light of other ships really easily. So the captain went to find the wireless operator, and he bumped into him as he was getting ready to go to bed and asked him, do you know of any other ships in this area? And the wireless operator said, only the Titanic. And Stanley Lord said, that doesn't look like the Titanic to me. And he handed over the watch to his crew, and the captain retired to his cabin. Well, not to his cabin, he went to the chart room to go and lay down and rest for the night. He told his crew to keep an eye on that ship and let him know if anything had changed with it. And then he went to the chart room to go to sleep. After the captain of the Californian had retired and was resting, the crew members that were on the deck of the Californian were watching this mystery ship on the horizon. And one of the crew members noted, do you see that? It looks like she's listing or leaning deeper on one end. And the crew member who was with him said that that's just because of the horizon. Now, they weren't aware of the mirage effect that was going on, but still, they were like, that's just a curvature of the horizon, whatever. And then right around this time, the Titanic began shooting off rockets.
This is a deleted scene from the James Cameron feature film, and it's a perfect example of what it's like when the Titanic was shooting off rockets. They travel up as high as possible and explode into a giant fireball of light and sparks in order to get the attention of any other ships in the area.
Now, ships at the time carried rockets, And rocket launches could have multiple meanings, but ships did fire rockets at sea for distress. But in order to have a rocket mean distress, they need to be fired in 1 minute intervals. So 1 minute, one rocket, another minute, another rocket, and keep doing it like that. So even though the Titanic fired a total of 8 rockets over the course of an hour, they weren't consistent with the maritime regulation for how to shoot off distress rockets at sea.
It took a little bit of work, but I was able to find the actual law determining how distress rockets need to be fired at sea. The 1912 International Rule of Road Governing Signals of Distress are quite clear. Article 31, Class 1 called for a cannon or explosive device fired at 1 minute intervals. This is the rocket usage for calling distress at sea.
The crew on the Californian began to talk amongst themselves while watching this weird ship that's stopped. It looks like it's leaning or listing in one direction, and she's shooting off rockets. And they were like, something could be wrong with that ship. And so they decided to radio the captain or talk to the captain. Ships at the time had these pipes that would go throughout the ship, and an officer could stand on one end, yell into it, and the voice would exit the other end. And the captain in the chart room of the Californian had one of these. So
this clip from the Titanic film A Night to Remember in 1958 showcases this. As you can see, the officer talks into this pipe or whistles in to get the man's attention, and then he has the receiving end of the pipe on the other end. And this system is how the captain of the Californian and the deck crew communicated that night.
They messaged him and said, hey, the ship is acting weird. It's shooting off rockets, and it's odd. And so the captain of the Californian said that the rockets could be company signals because he asked how frequently were they firing, and they were inconsistent with the distress call.
This picture showcases how the Titanic could have looked to the deck crew of the Californian. As you can see, most of the ship is in the obscured layer of the horizon, so the rockets would have appeared to be fired very, very low. So even if the Titanic's rockets were fired in a 1 minute interval, it could have been confusing to the deck crew of the California due to the mirage effect.
So he told them to try to contact the ship with a Morse lamp. Now, ships at the time had Morse lamps, and essentially they were giant flashlights that could be used to send messages to ships that didn't have a radio, because radio technology was very, very new at the time. And typically the ship's Morse lamps, they were usually located right around the bridge. Some of them, they were up here on the wing, this right around here. And this is a model of the Britannic. It has nothing to do with the story. So the Californian tried to use its Morse lamp to contact the Titanic. And now the Titanic was also observing this ship on the horizon as well. And the Titanic was sending out, radio signals like, hey, we need help. But because the Californian's radio operator had went to bed, he didn't know. The Californian couldn't hear it. So both ships tried to use Morse lamps to talk to each other. But because of the mirage effect that was going on that night, it was distorting the light. So they're watching this, and they're watching these, what they think the rockets are going up, they're not sure. They think the ship is leaning, they're not sure. They think they're seeing a Morse lamp signal, they're not sure. So you see, both sides were confused about what they were seeing. And that right there is where Stanley Lord made his big mistake. Just, if there's a ship, they think they're seeing rockets, there's some confusion about it, wake up the wireless guy. Have him go and see what was going on. That was the critical error that Stanley Lord made that night. So as this continued to go on for the next couple of hours, as the Titanic was sinking, the crew on the Californian noted that the ship that they were observing disappeared around 2:30 a.m. and the Titanic foundered at 2:20. So that was it. The Californian crew just figured, okay, she's steaming away. She's not there anymore. So the next morning, when the radio guy on the Californian woke up, he turned on his radio and he heard that the Titanic had sunk and that another ship called the Carpathia was coming to help. The Californian started up her engines and headed over to where the Carpathia was picking up the Titanic survivors. And they said, can we do anything to help? And the Carpathia radioed back saying that everything that can be done has been done. Go back to your course. So then the Californian resumed her previous course, and it couldn't do anything to help at that point. Anyway, guys, now you know the story of the Californian, the ship that could have helped the Titanic but didn't. And once again, just thank you so much for watching this video and all the support y'all are giving me. It means a lot. So please, once again, hit that subscribe button and give my video a like. And okay guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.